gift us the absolute right to overrule God, who would to whom human life owes its first cause. So with in vitro fertilization, we go beyond assisting fertility in the Marriage Act, and we, in effect, sideline the God-given manner for conception, and we turn conception into a technology that takes place in a petri dish. We obtain sperm, and we obtain an ova, some ovum, in the plural ova, because they almost never fertilize just one. And this amounts to telling God that this infertility shall not be. And so again, we have this very serious matter for us to consider. Now again, this idea that I have a right to have a child, that we just almost without thinking state stuff like that, and we don't just have a right to have a child. All right, we have to let God be the decider on that. But when we decide, no, I'm going to decide, and in effect, with in vitro, we overrule what God seems to be saying right now. Now, by the way, there are some things that the Church approves of that can be done to assist fertility. So take, for example, if a woman has a block in her fallopian tubes, we see that one of the things that can be done is that an ovum can be moved past the blockage, surgically placed beyond the blockage, and it then goes down the rest of the way, the fallopian tube, toward the uterus. And they go home and they have normal marital acts, and they may conceive now. That's assisting fertility. It's not replacing it. It's not overruling infertility, but it is assisting. There could be maybe some other things it could do, certain things, interventions that could help make the womb less problematic. Sometimes there's a problem in the womb, the wall of the womb, that an embryo can't properly adhere, and there can be some things that can be done to assist. But the parents engage in normal marital acts at home and leave the final decision to God. Those things. There's no problem with that by the Church. But IVF goes further, and it removes everything from the normal marital act, puts it in a petri dish, and in effect says, we're going to make sure this conception happens. So let's consider some other, I would say maybe some fallout from, approving of IVF. And by the way, for a disclaimer, I also want to say that it doesn't mean that every couple who's ever used IVF, in vitro fertilization, has thought through all of this. We really want to just overrule God. That's what we're all about here, They're going to couch it in other ways. We really want a child. It's a beautiful thing, and is that so wrong? And this is usually the thinking. But what we're being asked to consider is, in effect, though, it does amount to saying, "This shall not be." Now, let's look. I'm going to look at a number of things. We're going to be going to a break here in a couple of minutes, but so I'll get started with this list, and we'll look at it on the other side of the break. But let's first of all consider that with in vitro fertilization, one of the dangers is that life becomes like a consumer product. So in IVF, the fertilizable ova are removed from a woman's ovary and put into a petri dish, which is, vitrum is just a Latin for dish, a glass dish. So this is where we get the word in vitro. This ova the ova are put into this petri dish with a few concentrated drops of sperm, which are added, and this removes, really basically then, this creates a conception. And it also removes, though, this human conception from the Marriage Act, which is its sacred and proper place, where God acts to bestow life. IVF puts it in the laboratory, though, where man controls the process, and conception is treated as a technology, as a kind of a sought-after consumer product, rather than as part of a mystery of fruitful love caught up in the marriage embrace and the love of God. See, there's no mystery here. This is just plain science, and we're not going to let we will be in control of this process, you see. And it turns the whole thing, human life, which is sacred, into a kind of consumer product to be sought after. You pay the money, and they go to work, they bring about the proper end, and place it in the womb of the mother. So, with that in mind, we're going to take a break, and we're going to look at some, I think, other fallout that happens with IVF when we return.
listening to Guadalupe Radio for a couple years now, and I think it was a bumper sticker I saw on somebody's car one time, and it's a radio station that I don't have to be concerned about or worried about. When the kids and I are driving, I don't have to worry about inappropriate items. It's just the opposite. It's educational. I've learned so many different topics and on different subjects that I couldn't believe being a Catholic and being baptized as a child. There's so many things I didn't know, and now in these past couple of years that I've been listening in, I've learned so much.
Arm yourself for the daily spiritual battle. Visit St. Michael's Armory for beautiful sacramentals, recast antique metals and religious jewelry, and our exclusive sterling silver and wool brown scapulars. Take up these means to strengthen your soul and arm yourself well for the battle of life. stmichaelsarmory.com. That's stmichaelsarmory.com. Spiritual armor for the battle of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're currently cruising at 39,000 feet. We'll turn that seatbelt sign off for you and let you move about the cabin. Looks like we're about 2 hours and 10 minutes from landing. Plenty of time for you to do some Bible reading.
Wouldn't it be great if everyone read the Bible regularly? Why not start today? A friendly suggestion from Guadalupe Radio Network.
Welcome back to A Life Lived Joyfully on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Give us a call. The lines are open at 877-757-9424. That's 877-757-9424.
Good, and we are back. And I do hope that you will pick up the phone and call at 877-757-9424. I'd like to hear what you think. And I want to say again as a disclaimer, I know couples who have used IVF, and I know their children who came from that. This is not to just stand there and shake my finger and wag my finger at everybody. I don't know that everybody has thought through all of these things, and I don't. These things have these technologies and things have kind of come upon us rather suddenly in the last decades, and not everybody has thought through these things, but the church does, and ask us to consider not to have recourse to these things. That said, I'm not here to say, well, these children who were conceived in this way, there's something wrong with them. There isn't, and we should love them. Their children are children, okay? Whether they're born in this way or the normal way in a married family. And again, we all know some children are conceived as a result of rape. They're still children. We love them. We receive them. They did nothing wrong. To the parents even, and I don't always presume they knew everything they were doing at the time and thought through all of this. So this isn't to condemn, but this is to enlighten all of us. So we see that one of the first, kind of effects of this is that life becomes treated kind of like a consumer product. I need to go get some human life because God isn't giving it. So I'll go get it somehow. I'll purchase a service that will take care of this for me. Number two, it conveys the wrongful idea that a couple or a person has a right to have a child. See, a child is a person with rights, but he or she is not merely an object or a possession or some sort of technological product. So life is something that God gives, not something that he must give simply because we want it or demand it. And again, what's wrong with wanting a child? Well, there's nothing wrong with wanting a child, but we have to go to the one who gives this gift and say, you're in charge. This isn't something I can simply demand or that I claim that I have a right to have a child. Now, by the way, this extends beyond, heterosexual married couples. Very often, gay couples claim they have a right. They'll get a child through adoption, or they'll do surrogate motherhood, which is a certain form of in vitro. We'll talk about later. But at the end of the day, sometimes single women or single men claim a right to have a child, and again, either through adoption or surrogacy or some other method. Just because a person claims a right doesn't mean they do, and we might argue that a married heterosexual couple that desires a child is a good place for a child to be, all right. But for reasons of his own and through nature, God might be saying no or not now. Now, why might that be? Well, let's go on to the next thing, because you see, Not only is life sometimes like a consumer product in this thinking, or not only does it sort of convey the idea that people can have a right to have a child, but it also conveys the idea that, well, God is just wrong here. From a faith perspective, IVF simply refuses God's failure to act in accord with the wishes of the parents and removes the decision from God. God may be teaching something to the couple. Maybe he would like them to be adoptive parents. Maybe he would have some special work that he wants them to be devoted to. See, maybe in missionary work or whatever. But IVF suspends such discernment and forces the solution. What might God be saying to us? A couple might ask through our infertility. Is this simply a problem to solve? In whatever way we determine, or is God saying something to us? Is he trying to teach us humility? Maybe he knows things we don't know about how our health will be in the future. Maybe God is saying no, just because, again, he would like some couples to be open to adopting. And on I could go, all right, you see. So there is this idea that we just get to overrule God when he does things that we don't like. And God is just wrong here, And again, that's the implicit thing. Again, does every couple who goes and uses IVF say, take this, shake their fist at God and say, you're wrong and I'm going to go rectify this problem? No. But it is implicit, though, in this kind of activity. Now, number 4, there's a strong bias today toward only caring about what is best for adults. Now, this is widespread in our culture. So if adults are unhappy, they can just get divorced, no matter what this does to the children. The children have no legal voice or say in the matter. Gee, my parents are getting divorced. Do I have any legal right to sort of protest it? No, you're a child. You just have to learn to adjust, So there's a tendency today in our culture, starting with things like divorce, is that the feelings and thoughts and attitudes of the adults matter, but the kids, well, heck with them, they'll adjust. And this is common, again, in that way. Further, to go now to the abortion issue, if a child comes at an unexpected or inopportune time, many just abort. They say, well, it's just not good for me. Well, okay, but what about the kid? Well, what about the kid? I don't know. I never met him, So it becomes what is best for the adult or the adults in the matter. So, hey, that kid came at a time when my career's just taken off. Not very inconvenient. Or, hey, we were fornicating and we got this kid and the boyfriend doesn't want to, get married. So let's just, he'll pay to get the abortion done. You see, the kid gets in the way. And so again, this bias towards only caring about what's best for adults and the children. Well, either they're going to be killed through abortion or, suffer through the insanity of mixed families and all that stuff that comes with divorce, living out of a suitcase, one house this weekend, the next house the next weekend, just all that stuff, And but that also then comes to roost here with this question of IVF. In IVF and in vitro fertilization, there's also some of this thinking. Since it seems what matters most is what the adults want a baby. They just want a baby, and that's what matters. Never mind that IVF what it might do to the child. Never mind what it might do about how we think of life as a technology to be exercised at our whim. Never mind that that imperfect embryos will be discarded or frozen, and never mind that many IVF procedures selectively abort babies later. Never mind that children of IVF children are more often born prematurely or suffer higher rates of birth defects. What matters is that the adults want and demand to have a child. And so again, I don't argue that every family or couple that, married couple that went to get IVF was thinking this way, but I think we have to think that this is something worth considering, that what we're doing. Now, the other thing I just mentioned, that there's the fifth problem with this is that very often embryos are discarded. As already stated, it's a usual practice that more eggs are fertilized than the woman will need. This is because not all the embryos survive the process. Thus, more than one egg, usually several or numerous eggs, are fertilized, and if quote, too many embryos survive, the rest are either discarded, that is to say, killed, or frozen, or mined for stem cells. This is common. These embryos are sold for stem cell research. It's another way of just killing them. In some cases as well, too many embryos are accepted by the woman's womb, and then they may be selectively aborted later so that the desired number of children is not exceeded. Now, this is where it gets ugly. And I would argue that many IVF couples are often informed of these things, but maybe just dismiss it. I don't know. How much do they know or understand this? What will happen to those other embryos that don't get implanted? What goes on? Well, we're going to put them in deep freeze. Well, don't worry. They're still alive. They're just in deep freeze. And, well, is that what we should be doing to human beings? See? Now, you can read a lot more on this question of the question. I have posted an article here, and I guess, Mr. Producer, we can find it at YouTube or at at our Facebook page. But there are some notes that go with this show, and in those notes, there's also a link to a Vatican document, Instruction on the Respect for Human Life and Its Origin and on the Dignity of Procreation, where these things, again, are placed, before you in greater detail than I've done here. So again, we want to be aware that we're now at another cultural showdown. It's been going on, but it's sort of behind the scenes. But I would say, please consider that IVF and abortion have some things in common, namely this: playing God, saying that I have the right over life, that I get to call the shots, all right? So again, my articles here, that I'm going to be giving you another article on the next thing we'll talk about Chicken Little and fear. But these articles can be found at the, excuse me, my cough is somewhat bad today. But again, they can be found at our YouTube page, Instagram, Twitter, namely X, and Rumble. So all of this show is placed live there, and then also available to be heard in a recorded form. And you will find the articles there again at our YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, or namely X page, and Rumble, okay? And also at GRN Online, okay? So you'll find a link there to the Vatican document. I encourage you to read more if you'd like to. Now, again, we are again at this cultural showdown, and as I've said, abortion and IVF do have these things in common, whether we like to admit it or not, that we're sort of playing God and saying that we have a right over life, that we get to call the shots. Abortion demands the right to end life, but IVF demands the right to produce it. And neither is a right that we should claim. God is the author of life, you see. IVM goes beyond assisting what God has set forth, that is to say the Marriage Act, and it seeks to force an outcome, in effect, removing God's sovereignty over human life, all right? And again, we end up becoming consumers of life rather than those who are meant to reverence and respect it. Now, we're going to be going to a break in a minute, but look, 877-757-9424. And I'd especially like to hear from you if some of these words, kind of you find stinging or excessive on my part. I realize, and I've made this disclaimer many times now in this show, that not everybody thinks this through. Some couples just sort of feel desperate, and they hear that this can be done, and they never heard a priest or anyone talk about it. It's not exactly something that's so common that we talk about frequently in the pulpit. And again, should we talk about it more? Yeah. But it's like anything. There's so many things to discuss, and sometimes things have to come to the news before we end up discussing them. So here we are. Now, when we return, we'll just do a little wrap-up on this question of IVF, and then I want to talk about a different topic, but it's still very important, and that is that how we deal with fear. Do we fear the right thing? When we return.
Thanks for listening to A Life Lived Joyfully. Do you have a question for Monsignor Pope, or would you like to comment? Give us a call now at 877-757-9424. Again, that number is 877-757-9424. We'll be back after the break.
Visit the sick? Am I supposed to do that?
I'm a patient at a state hospital, and we have no Catholic minister. We have no priest, no deacon that comes to see us. And the only blessing I have is AM radio to listen to my Catholic family, my Catholic ministry. And I want to say God bless you and thank you very much for your ministry, number one. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have a connection to my family out there. And as to the Holy Father, oh, what a blessing. Yesterday I listened to him. I just remembered that I was part of a Catholic family, that no matter where I am, how far away I am, and no matter how lonely I might get sometimes, I'm part of the universal family.
Universal Church.
Excuse me, but you know, I love you guys.
Every time you support the Guadalupe Radio Network, either by prayer or finances, you go with us to visit the sick, the imprisoned, and those that are homebound. Call 888-784-3476 or visit grnonline.com to make your gift.
My heart wasn't really in my faith. There was more to life than what I was doing. I walked into the church and I really believed that putting my hand in the holy water, that it was going to bubble over and the church was going to collapse. And I was really nervous. I couldn't imagine life without being a part of the church. When I walk in the doors of the Catholic Church now, I feel alive, complete, and at home.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church, visit catholicscomehome.org.
Do you long to hear God's voice? Lord, teach me to pray. The free Ignatian prayer series will open your heart to His voice, to the peace you are seeking, and the only love that fulfills the human heart, Jesus. God is calling you to true joy, knowing Jesus personally. Lord, Teach Me to Pray is free. Go to LordTeachMeToPray.com. Click on the red box, order Lord Teach Me to Pray now. Go to LordTeachMeToPray.com.
Welcome back to A Life Lived Joyfully on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Give us a call. The lines are open at 877-757-9424. That's 877-757-9424.
And because all things are perfect in threes, I'll give it one more time, 877-757-9424. All right. So we've been just to wrap up on in vitro fertilization. Some in the pro-life community were both surprised pleasantly, but also in some ways caught off guard a little by the Alabama Supreme Court saying, hey, embryos are human beings. And suddenly, some of these IVF clinics say, does that mean you can sue us? Or does that mean we're doing something wrong? Suddenly they felt legally vulnerable. And there's a lot of overlap between pro-life community and trying to assist fertilization and fertility and so on. And again, not everybody's thought through all these issues and even knows exactly what IVF is. They think, well, it's just, I don't know, it's just, you just fertilize a child and put it in the womb. Well, it's not that simple. There's more going on. There's more embryos that are needed are being, and so on. I've gone through the details. I would simply say this finally, again. We live in times where too many people think they can just have whatever they want. And many think that if we can do something, that we should just be free to be able to do it. But there are more things at stake than just what we want. There's reverence for the sacred and mystery of life. There's concern for the common good. There's concern of what actually happens to imperfect or superfluous embryos and so on. These are things that are important to consider. And the moral agent, which is we are all called to be, is called to recognize and ponder these things and not just say, well, but it feels good, it feels right, I think I should. Okay, but we need to have more than that. And again, these are the things that I think we need to consider. And this is why the church, you sort of pay us to think about these things in the church. This is kind of why we're here. And we've been thinking for 2,000 years about these sorts of things. And even when these new technologies come up, we do have things that we have to ponder. That if the human embryo is a human being, which we have always said it is, then IVF is wrong, the way it's done. And there are things we can do to assist fertility, but we cannot simply force the outcome because, darn it, I want it. And I have respect for couples who struggle with infertility and went this route, maybe not always knowing the full details. I'm not here to personally judge every case or to raise any red flags about children who are born due to this. I can simply say that God doesn't limit or hinder our freedom in these regards, but he does ask us to ponder and think and say no to IVF, all right? And that's where we'll end on that. Now, with that in mind, let's turn our attention to a completely different topic, but one that's, I think back to COVID and how they were able to take fear and just... By the way, I don't know if you can hear all those sirens in the background like I can, but that's welcome to Washington, D.C. All right. So I apologize if those things are coming through on this broadcast. A lot of sirens are going by right now. Look, a huge issue is fear. You remember back during COVID, was it not in fact fear? And out of fear, people did astonishing things. First of all, many people were willing, I say, to just give up their rights. I can't go to work. The government says so. Can't go to church. Well, the government says so. Well, why? Well, there's this little virus, and some people are dying from it. You say, well, sounds like the flu. No, this one's more serious. You come to find out, well, maybe less than 1% die from it, but oh my gosh, everything went put on hold. But it's not only what the government did, it's what we did to each other. Just how awful we treated each other. The masked Nazis who were chasing down people who weren't wearing masks, running them out of stores. The kind of stuff the cancel culture that set up around these things. If somebody says, well, I think maybe we got this wrong. Or there's something that's not quite right about these medical conclusions. Oh my gosh, silence him. He's dangerous. And this kind of stuff. The pressure to get vaccinated, to put a very untested drug into your arm there. And all the stuff we did, and why it all came back to this thing called fear. Some people said it's an acronym, false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. Wow. And that's where we are. How many times did Jesus have to tell us not to be afraid? I'll tell you a little bit of a parable about fear, and then I'm going to get into the story of Chicken Little here. But the parable goes like this. Back in the 1980s, all these kids were inhaling, aerosol to get high. And some of them were getting sick, some of them were even dying. And so they started putting warning labels, and warning, inhaling this product may cause death. Well, the problem is kids aren't afraid of dying. Death is an abstraction to them. So they weren't really afraid. But anyway, they said, we got to get this stopped, man. Some of these kids are dying. And the lawyers are, oh my gosh, we're going to get sued. You get it. All right, now. So they called in a psychologist, and they said, what are we going to do? How can we word this warning so these kids will stop doing this? He says, well, you got to find out what they're afraid of. So anyway, they changed the wording of the warning to the following. Warning. Inhaling this product may indeed cause hair loss and facial disfigurement. And it all stopped immediately. I mean, almost overnight, these kids stopped inhaling that stuff. Because they're not afraid of dying, but they're afraid of looking bad. Losing their hair or somehow looking bad. Now, again, you see, but isn't it kind of a lie? Well, no. When you die, your hair falls out and your face becomes disfigured, But the point is that if you can find out what a person fears, you can control them. Now, this is for better or for worse, because there are some things we should fear. All right. With that in mind, fear is a powerful thing. And we can easily be manipulated if we fear the wrong things. And most of us do fear the wrong things. We fear things that are passing. We fear things that are worldly, but we don't fear God. We don't fear eternity and where we'll be for eternity. So the story of Chicken Little kind of tells us a little something about fear. And let me read it, just read you the story. And it's not a real long story. It's sort of a monotonous story because of but I think you'll enjoy it. It goes like this. Chicken Little was in the woods one day when an acorn fell on her head. It scared her so much that she trembled all over. She shook so hard and half her feathers fell out. Help, help, she cried. The sky is falling. I must go and tell the king. So she ran in great fright to tell the king. Along the way, she met Henny Penny. Where are you going, Chicken Little? Henny Penny asked. Oh, help, Chicken Little cried. The sky is falling. Well, how do you know the sky is falling? Asked Henny Penny. Well, I saw it with my own eyes. I heard it with my own ears, and part of it fell on my head. This is just terrible, Henny Penny, the hen clucked. We better run. So they both ran away as fast as they could, and soon they met Ducky Lucky. Where are you going, Chicken Little and Henny Penny? He asked. The sky is falling, and we're going to tell the king, they cried. How do you know? Asked Ducky Lucky. I saw it with my own eyes, I heard it with my own ears, and part of it fell on my head, Chicken Little said. Oh dear, Ducky Lucky quacked. We'd better run. So they all ran down the road as fast as they could. Soon they met Goosey Lucy, waddling along the roadside. Hello there, Chicken Little, Henny Penny, and Ducky Lucky, asked Goosey Lucy. What are you all going in such a hurry? Well, we're running for our lives, cried Chicken Little. The sky is falling, clucked Henny Penny, and we're running to the king to tell him, quacked Ducky Lucky. How do you know the sky's falling? Asked Goosey Lucy. I saw it with my own eyes, I heard it with my own ears, and part of it fell on my head, Chicken Little said. Oh, goodness, squawked Goosey Lucy. Then I'd better run along with you. So they all ran in great fright across the meadow. Before long they met Turkey Lurkey, who was strutting back and forth. Hello there, Chicken Little, Henny Penny, Ducky Lucky, and Goosey Lucy, he called. Where are you going in such a hurry? Help, help, cried Chicken Little. We're running for our lives, clucked Henny Penny. The sky is falling, quacked Ducky Lucky. And we're running to tell the king, squawked Goosey Lucy. How do you know the sky is falling? Asked Turkey Lurkey. I saw it with my own eyes, I heard it with my own ears, and part of it fell on my head, Chicken Little said. Oh dear, I always suspected the sky would fall some day, Turkey Lurkey gobbled. I'd better run along with you. So they all ran with all their might. And then until they met the fox, Foxy Loxy. Well, said Foxy Loxy, where are you rushing on such a fine day? Help, help, cried Chicken Little, Henny Penny, Ducky Lucky, Goosey Lucy, Turkey Lurkey. It's not a fine day at all. The sky is falling, and we're running to tell the king. Well, how do you know the sky is falling? Said Foxy Loxy. I saw it with my own eyes, heard it with my own ears, and part of it fell on my head, Chicken Little said. I see, said Foxy Loxy. Well then, follow me, and I'll show you the way to the king. So Foxy Loxy led Chicken Little, Henny Penny, Ducky Lucky, Goosey Lucy, and Turkey Lurkey across the field and through the woods, and he led them straight to his own den, and they never saw the king to tell him the sky was falling. So you see, they feared everything but what they should have feared, right? They feared the sky was falling, but they should have feared Foxy Loxy, who had them all for a meal, and what a meal it must have been. So you see, notice how fearing the wrong thing and fearing it to excess blinded them to what was more truly to be feared, what was more truly a threat. And here lies a doorway for the devil. He incites us to fear lesser things, like unpopularity or the loss of money or poor health or the loss of worldly trinkets or the next election or global warming or persecution or worldly setbacks. We're supposed to fear those things more than we fear Judgment Day and the possibility of going to hell. We're all focused on the wrong thing. And we stare right in the face what we should fear, and it doesn't occur to us. We're so worked up about all the other stuff. You know, the devil works this way. He gets us to get all wrapped up and focused in stuff that's either not that important or stuff we can't do much about, so that we don't do something about what we ought to fear and what we can do something about. So we've got some more to talk about here when we return. When we talk about this question of fear, making sure you fear the right thing, not the wrong thing, when we return.
Thanks for listening to A Life Lived Joyfully. Do you have a question for Monsignor Pope, or would you like to comment? Give us a call now at 877-757-9424. Again, that number is 877-757-9424. We'll be back after the break.
Obedience is the second temptation of the devil for Jesus in the wilderness. The evil one showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a single instant. Then he said to Jesus, I shall give to you all this power and their glory, for it has been handed over to me, and I may give it to whomever I wish. All this will be yours if you worship me. But Jesus again quotes from Deuteronomy and says, You shall worship the Lord your God, and him alone shall you serve. Unlike the Israelites who gave into the false worship of the golden calf when they grew impatient of Moses up on Mount Sinai, Jesus stays firm and loyal to the first commandment of the law, to not worship false gods or idols, and to remain obedient to God his Father alone. Let us reflect on any false gods, idols, or priorities in our lives during this holy season of Lent. This is Matt Maloney from knowthefaith.net.
Thank you for listening to the Guadalupe Radio Network and being part of the family. Families pray for each other. We would be honored if you would let us pray with you and for you. You don't even have to tell us your name. Just go to our website, grnonline.com, or call our prayer request line and leave us a message at 800-395-4008. That's 800-395-4008. We will be praying for you every day.
Welcome back to A Life Lived Joyfully on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Give us a call. The lines are open at 877-757-9424. That's 877-757-9424.
And we are back, and I've been reviewing with you the children's story of Chicken Little. And you know, those old children's stories, I hope you still read them to your kids. They have a lot of wisdom. There's a good collection, by the way, that came out many years ago now by the former head of the Department of Education, Bill Bennett, that's his name. And it was the Book of Virtues, and stories about virtue. And some of these kinds of stories are there. But again, even these just things that didn't make his book, are still they're very instructive, these little children's stories. And so here you have, just to summarize, Chicken Little. Chicken Little was concerned an acorn hit her on the head, and she thought, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, and she went into a tizzy and picked up some friends along the way and drove them into fear, and they were all in a tizzy because, fear tends to spread, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. And it just starts to spread like wildfire, and everyone gets worked up and fearful. And so she brings quite a little company along with her, and suddenly they meet a guy named Foxy Loxy. And this fox is not afraid. He sees some good meals here. And he said, let me show you the way to the king. And let's just say they never got to the king, and they never saw home again. So it has a dark end to the tale. Oh, we shouldn't tell scary stories to children. Yes, we should. Because children children have fear anyway, Remember, Our Lady took them on a tour of hell, So, but again, there are things for us to learn from this little child's story that, again, they were fearing the wrong thing, that the sky was falling, It's a silly thing. The sky doesn't fall. Things can fall from the sky, but you get the idea. But they feared it to excess, and it blinded them to what should truly have been feared, namely when they encountered the fox, the wolf. And again, this is what they should have really feared, but they were so worked up about things that they shouldn't be afraid of that they didn't fear things they should be afraid of. And what is it for us? We're so worked up about the loss of money or poor health or the loss of worldly trinkets or the next election or global warming or being persecuted or some worldly setback. We're worked up about all that, but we don't seem to be worked up about what's much more important, namely Judgment Day. and the possibility of going to hell. The day of destiny is closing in, but never mind all that. The sky is falling. See? The wrong political party's in power. The planet is overheating. The economy is about to collapse. COVID-19 everywhere. You might lose your home to a storm. People might not think, the rising sea levels, and so on. People might not think you're pretty enough or tall enough. People might be laughing at you behind your back. You get the idea. Be very afraid. Be afraid. Be very, very afraid. We're told. You don't have time to pray. You don't have time to pray and ask God to get you ready for Judgment Day. You're too busy running around being afraid that eating food X might cause cancer, or that people might be laughing at you because of 5 or 10 pounds you gained last Christmas, or that the Yellowstone caldera might blow at any time, you see? This is how we are. And I tell you, all these aforementioned concerns is not that they have no merit, but they have a lot less merit than what most people never think about or fear, namely where they're going to spend eternity. So Chicken Little and her friends were easy prey for Foxy Loxy because they were all obsessed with lesser things and ignored the danger they were staring right at, right there. Like a fox, like a wolf. See, so Foxy Loxy has you worried about smaller things. Yes, Foxy Loxy, you're worried about the devil, in other words, has us worrying about a lot of smaller passing things so that we're easy prey. It will just take a moment for him then to lead you astray, to have you for dinner. See, that's what the devil's doing. See? Do you fear the right thing? Look, it's amazing to me. Let's just give some examples. Some years ago, it occurred to me that, we all get worked up with anxious if the kid's failing math, and hire the tutor, spend the money. This kid's going to have to pass, because if they don't pass math, they might not get in the right high school. And if they don't get into the right high school, they won't get into the right college, and their whole life could be affected. They might not get the job, the career. And we're all worked up about all that stuff, right? But we don't seem to be worried about whether or not they're going to go to hell, or whether they know anything about God or anything. Or take an example, typical, and we clergy are just as guilty as anybody else. Oh, good news, Johnny got a full scholarship to Harvard, or, fill in the blank, some other college. Okay, that's good news. But now what we got to say is great. But who's going to preach the gospel to Johnny up there? Because he could go out there, come out of Harvard lawyer, and go to hell. We're all excited and joyful and worked up about this big scholarship. But is he going to go to heaven or not? Some people are climbing the ladder of success, and it's leaning up against the wrong wall. And it's not about Harvard, it's about hell that we should be concerned. And yet we're not, you see. And of course we live in this age of, universalism, where everybody thinks, everybody's just going to go to heaven. That is not what Scripture teaches. I'm going to spend Friday's show on that with you, okay? We got to get back to the basic charisma. And that is to say, we absolutely need the church. We need the sacraments. We need the Word of God. I'll tell you why. Because we got it bad, and that ain't good. We have a very strong tendency to sin, and left to ourselves, we're going to very easily just walk right into hell. And we've got to get sober about that and stop all this, that won't be a problem. And so that we end up running right into Foxy Loxy and thinking he's just another friend, and we're all worked up about the sky is falling, which, if it is, we can't do anything about it, and B, it's not falling. It's not that bad. Not compared to being had for dinner by the fox. And yet that's how we are. That's how we are. In this, I have this also posted. There's a link to this post at the different places I mentioned to you earlier, where we have these radio shows. Our link, we stream them, and then we have them saved for you there at Instagram, at Rumble. We have it at X, Twitter, the former Twitter, and Facebook, and so on. You can go to GRN online as well. But so the notes are there for this. But if you press the link to the notes, there's an interesting video by Bishop Barron, and I actually have some differences with Bishop Barron on. I think he's a little bit too prone to think that hell's probably largely empty. or that most will be saved. Let's put it that way. But again, he's a great teacher and preacher and so on. I would say that he has, though, a very interesting video here where he makes a remark. He and I are the same age. We grew up in the same, almost the same neighborhood in Chicago, north of Chicago. And he's smarter than I am, but we both, Chicago's kind of the hometown for both of us. And he says it's interesting. Right now, he says the 3 tallest buildings in Chicago are all named for insurance companies. And you can tell a lot about a people based on their buildings. In the Middle Ages, the church was the biggest building. By the Renaissance, it was the government buildings or the palace, the king. Now it's insurance companies. Tells you that we're a very worried people. And so again, just some thoughts. What do you fear? Are you fearing the right thing? Do you fear the wrong thing and let it distract you so that you don't fear what you ought to fear? Pray for the fear of the Lord. And we'll talk about this more on Friday with you again on the show. So bless you all, and I wish you all a blessed week. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.